Okay, I gotta be honest. I still get freaked out when it snows a lot. It's been a year since that night, back in January 2025, and I'm just now able to sit in a room without checking all the window locks every few minutes. I'm 30, and I've lived in some pretty rough parts of Philly. I've never been the type to get scared easily, but what went down at that cabin in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, messed me up pretty good. It was one of those winter weekends where you think you're being all smart by escaping the city. Work had been awful. I do graphic design, and let me tell you, it's way more draining than people think. And I just wanted to chill out and stare at some trees for a few days. I found this cabin on a rental site, and it looked perfect. It was a small A-frame place tucked way back in the woods near this town called Ohiopyle. The listing said it was totally private, and for once, the internet wasn't lying. I drove up on a Friday afternoon. The sky was this gross, purple color that meant a bunch of snow was coming. By the time I turned off the main road, the snow was already coming down hard. My truck, this old Ford, was struggling, but I got to the cabin just as the sun was going down. The place was nice, but in a creepy, lonely way. It was all dark wood and glass, with a big deck overlooking a drop into a ravine. I unloaded my bags, some food, and enough firewood to last a week. The inside was one big room with a loft for the bed. It felt cozy at first. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be inside while the wind started picking up. By 9 p.m., the storm was going crazy. It was super quiet except for the wind whistling through the windows. I was on the sofa, messing with my laptop, trying not to think about how my phone had 0 bars. I figured the weather just knocked out a tower nearby. I had a drink and a book, and I was finally starting to relax. Then I heard something. It wasn't even loud. It was this soft, steady sound coming from the deck. It sounded like something heavy was being dragged across the wood. I thought maybe a branch had fallen, or the wind was moving the furniture. I got up and went to the glass door. It was covered in snow, so I had to use my hands to see anything. The deck was empty. The chairs were under the table, just like I left them. The snow was already thick. Then I looked down and saw footprints that made my stomach feel weird. They didn't come from the stairs. They started in the middle of the deck, near the edge, and went right to the sliding door. They were big, deep prints, boots for sure, and they were fresh. It was snowing so hard they should have been covered, but those prints were clear. Whoever made them had been standing right there, looking at me, probably a minute ago. I felt that shot of adrenaline. I looked out into the trees, but I couldn't see anything. It was so dark. I checked the lock on the door. It was a cheap little thing that would break if you looked at it wrong. I grabbed a kitchen chair and stuck it under the handle. I felt stupid, but I couldn't help it. I went around, checking every window. There were only a few downstairs. I locked them all and closed the curtains. I told myself it was just a neighbor or some kids, but I knew I was way out in the woods. Nobody was just passing through in weather like that. I sat down again, but I didn't read. I just sat there, listening. Every time the house made a noise, I jumped. After a while, I started to think I was being a baby. Maybe someone's car went off the road and they needed help. But if that was true, why didn't they knock? Why would they just stand on the deck and then leave? After a while, I heard tapping. It wasn't on the sliding door. It was on the small window in the kitchen, right where I was standing earlier. It was slow and steady. 3 taps, then a pause, then 3 more. I grabbed the fire poker. It was all I had that felt like a weapon. I walked to the kitchen, my heart going crazy. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want anyone out there to see me. "Who's there?" I yelled. My voice sounded weak. "I have a gun." I've never touched one. The tapping stopped. I stood there, listening to the fridge. Then I heard a voice from outside. It was a guy, and even though the storm was loud, he sounded calm. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "My truck is in a ditch, about a mile back. I saw your lights. My phone died, and I'm freezing. Can you let me in?" For a second, I felt like I could breathe again. It was just a guy who needed help. I almost opened the door, but then I stopped. Something was wrong. "How did you get on the deck?" I asked, still holding the poker. "The stairs are on the other side, and there aren't any tracks." It was quiet for a long time. The wind was loud. "I climbed the railing," he said. "The snow is deep. It was easier." "I'll call someone," I said. "Just wait there." "I told you," he said, and he didn't sound nice anymore. "My phone died, and so did yours. I cut the line outside. I didn't want anyone calling. I felt sick. I looked at the plug where the phone was supposed to connect. I hadn't checked it. I ran over, picked up the phone, and listened. Nothing. This guy wasn't just stranded. He had planned this. I moved back to the middle of the room where the fireplace was. I needed to think. My truck was outside, but if he cut the phone line, then he probably messed with the engine too. I heard a loud bang on the front door, then another. He was trying to break it down. The wood was thick, but the frame was old. I could see the door shaking every time he hit it. I looked around, trying to figure out what to do. The loft. If I could get up to the loft, there was a window that opened onto the roof. I could jump from there and get into the woods. I ran up the ladder, my hands shaking so bad I almost fell. I got to the top and crawled over to the window. I tried to open it, but it was stuck. I used the poker to break the glass. It was so loud in the small room. I leaned out and the cold hit me hard. I looked down at the roof, but then I froze. There was someone else. Down on the driveway, standing next to my truck, was another person. He was taller and wearing a bright yellow jacket. He was just standing there, staring up at the loft window. He didn't move at all. Then I heard the front door break downstairs. Wood was breaking, and it was loud. I heard boots on the floor. "I know you're up there," the voice from the kitchen said. He was inside now, and he sounded bored. "There's nowhere to go. Just come down and make this easy. We just want the truck." I knew then that the guy in the yellow jacket wasn't just watching. He was in charge. He was waiting for his friend to scare me out. I pulled my head back in and hid in the corner of the loft. I was trapped. I had broken glass behind me and a fire poker. I heard the guy downstairs walking around. He wasn't being fast. He was going through drawers and messing with things. I heard silverware. He was in the kitchen. "You know," he said, and his voice echoed, "you picked a bad night to be tough. We've been watching this place for days. We know the owner wasn't coming back until Monday." I didn't say anything. I was trying to breathe slowly, trying to think if I could jump from the roof without getting hurt. The snow was deep, which was good, but it was a long way down. Then something happened that I still don't understand. The guy downstairs stopped talking. I heard a sound like someone got hit, and then something heavy fell. It sounded like a body hitting the floor. Then nothing. I waited, my heart racing. "Hey?" I whispered. Nobody answered. I crawled to the edge of the loft and looked over. It was dark, just the fire. I could see someone lying on the floor near the front door. It was the man. He was on his face, his arms out. He wasn't moving. I looked at the broken door. The guy in the yellow jacket was standing there. He had a metal bar in his hand. He walked into the cabin, past the body of the man who had been talking to me. He looked up at the loft. He saw me. He just put a finger to his lips, telling me to be quiet. He reached down, grabbed the first man, and started dragging him out into the snow. It looked easy for him. He dragged him all the way to the driveway, toward the trees. I stayed in that loft for hours. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I watched the driveway until the sun started to come up. The yellow jacket was gone. My truck was still there. The man was gone. When it was light, I went down the ladder. The front door was broken. There was blood on the floor going out into the snow. I ran to my truck, expecting it to be broken, but it started right up. I didn't grab anything. I just drove. I went over the grass until I got to the road. I called the police from a gas station. When they got to the cabin, they found something that the detective said I wasn't supposed to know. They found the man who had been dragging his partner. He was in the woods, and he'd been dead for 2 days. It turns out he was the actual owner of the cabin, and he'd been killed when he showed up early. The man in the yellow jacket I saw standing by my truck, the one who killed the other guy and told me to be quiet, the police never found him, but they found a third set of prints. They didn't go to a car. They went from the crawl space out to the driveway and then back into the house. I realized then that the guy who saved me wasn't a good guy. He was the one who had killed the owner 2 days before. He'd been living in the crawl space while I was there. He hadn't saved me because he was nice. He'd saved me because he didn't want the other guys messing up his new house. I am still thinking that he could also get rid of me, but he didn't. I don't have the answer to why he didn't, but the whole experience is something that will stick with me forever. I'm 30, and most of my 20s were spent in jobs that could crush anyone's spirit. I did retail, delivered pizzas in rough areas, and for the last few years, I've been with a security firm. Usually, my shifts are boring. I'm often at empty office buildings or half-built shopping centers where the most exciting thing is chasing off a stray cat or trying to stay awake. I bring books or my laptop to pass the time because the silence gets to you after a while. Last February, I was in a small Colorado town near the Rockies. It was a horrible winter. Snow piled up so high, it felt like living in a bunker. One Saturday, my boss called out of nowhere. He sounded worried and said he needed someone to cover a shift at a private place way up in the mountains, about 40 miles away. It was short notice, but the pay was triple because of the danger of driving in bad weather. I needed the money, so I took it. The place was called a historic manor, but it was just a huge, old, lonely house that looked like it was from an old movie. Some rich tech guy bought it to use as a private getaway. Even though it was in the mountains, the house felt totally cut off. You couldn't see any other lights around. To get there, I drove through big iron gates and up a super long driveway. By the time I got there, it was dark. The snow was coming down hard. When the gates closed behind me, the normal sounds went away. The trees along the drive were old and covered in snow, hanging over the road like frozen arms. The security office was a small room just inside the main entrance, with a big window facing the long driveway. Inside was some monitors showing security camera feeds from the hallways, gardens, and back entrance. Next to the monitors was a panel with lights connected to motion sensors. If something moved, the light would flash, showing where to look on the cameras. The guard I was replacing, Miller, was really eager to leave. He rushed through the basics, grabbed his coat, and left without saying goodbye. He didn't even leave the radio, which was annoying, but I thought I could use my phone if I needed anything. I sat down and tried to settle in. The first few hours were quiet. I walked around the house to get some blood flowing. It wasn't falling apart, and it had expensive furniture. But walking down a hall near the library, I saw some old pictures on the wall. Most were just landscapes, but one caught my eye. It was a man, probably in his 50s, in a suit that seemed too formal for the mountains. He looked stern, and his eyes seemed to stare right through you. It sounds dumb, but that picture made me feel uneasy. I went back to the office and made coffee. Around midnight, the first alarm went off. It scared me because it had been so quiet. I checked the panel, and it showed movement outside the office window. I looked at the camera screen, but there was nothing, just snow and shadows. I figured it was the wind or a deer. Over the next hour, more sensors went off. First in the garden, then by the back gates, then upstairs in the master bedroom. They weren't in order, just random. Every time I looked at the cameras, I didn't see anything moving. The house felt darker, and I felt like I wasn't alone. I was getting nervous. I called Miller to ask if the sensors always did this. I dialed the number he left, but it went to voicemail. I tried my boss, but the reception was bad. I called a friend just to hear someone else's voice. He was surprised I was out there in this weather. I joked about the house and the creepy photos. While we were talking, 2 sensors went off at the same time. One was at the far end of the property, and the other was right behind the security office door, close to where I was sitting. I hung up fast and stared at the door, my heart racing. I didn't open it, I just sat there, watching the monitors. Then I saw a man on the screen for the back hallway. He was tall, maybe in his 50s, wearing a suit like the one in the photo I'd seen. He was just standing there, looking at the camera. He didn't look like a robber. He looked like he fit in, but something about him was off. He was mumbling to himself and tilting his head in weird ways. I felt sick. I watched him reach into his pocket and take out a small camera. I heard a clicking sound. He was taking pictures of the empty hallway, the doors, and the ceiling. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he was acting like he was on a tour. I picked up the phone to call the police, but it was dead. I realized I was 40 miles from town in a storm with this crazy guy walking around the house. I watched him go to the next camera's view. He was getting closer to the office. Suddenly, the clicking came from outside my door. He wasn't just taking pictures of the house anymore. I could hear the camera snapping through the wood. He was taking pictures of the door handle, the frame, and the gap underneath. I grabbed my flashlight, yelled through the door, and asked what he was doing. I told him I'd called the cops. The clicking stopped. "I'm calling my sister," a voice said from the other side. It was a flat voice. "I'm just taking some selfies. I can see you on the camera," I yelled. "I know you're taking pictures of the house. Get out now." The man denied it, saying he wasn't doing anything wrong. Then he got angry. He said if I had a problem, we could talk about it. He started shaking the door handle, trying to get in. I wondered why he didn't just show me his camera if he was a guest and had nothing to hide. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and ran out the back way to the garage. I didn't care about the job. I just wanted to get away. I jumped into my truck and hit the garage door opener. As the door opened, I saw him standing in the driveway in the snow. He was whistling, a loud whistle that echoed through the trees. Then another whistle answered him from the woods on my left, and another from the right. There wasn't just one of them. There were at least 3 or 4 dark figures moving between the trees, all wearing the same dark suits. I didn't stop to look. I put the truck in gear and sped down the driveway, sliding in the snow. I didn't look back until I got to the gates. I drove to the sheriff's station. I was pale and shaking too hard to talk. I described the man and the whistling to the deputies. They said they'd go check it out, but they looked at me like I was making it up. I waited at the station for 2 hours. When the deputies came back, they looked different. They weren't smiling anymore. They said they'd gone to the house and found the front door open. Nobody was there, but they found something in the security office. On the desk, where I'd been sitting, was the camera the man had been carrying. They opened the photos to see who he was. There were hundreds of pictures on it, but they weren't of the house. They were pictures of me. There were pictures of me driving through the gates, walking through the kitchen, and sitting at the desk, taken from behind me. The last photo was taken right before I ran out. It was a shot of the back of my neck through the crack in the door. The worst part wasn't the photos. The sheriff said they'd checked the owner's information. The tech guy who bought the house didn't exist. The security company had been hired through a fake group that disappeared the next day. I don't know if those guys were a cult or something worse. I just know they weren't there to rob the place. They were there for me. And I'm telling this story because I didn't wait to see what they wanted to do with those pictures. I learned that night to trust your gut when something feels wrong, especially when you're alone in the dark. Sometimes the person watching the cameras isn't the only one seeing everything. I never thought I'd be the guy telling one of these stories. You always hear them and think, I would have just left, or why didn't he check the locks? But when you're actually in the situation, logic just kind of evaporates. It gets replaced by this heavy, confusing denial. You convince yourself you're being paranoid because the alternative is too terrifying to process. This happened last January. I had been working 60-hour weeks at a logistics firm in Chicago, and I was burnt out. I needed a reset. I didn't want a beach. I wanted silence. I found this cabin on a rental site up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The listing boasted about it being off the grid and secluded, which was exactly what I wanted. Just me, some books, and a few bottles of whiskey for 4 days. I drove up on a Tuesday. The deeper I got into the peninsula, the deeper the snow got. By the time I turned onto the private access road, my GPS had already lost signal. The road was barely a road, just 2 tire tracks cut into 2 feet of hard-packed powder. My truck handled it fine, but I remember thinking that if I got stuck out here, I was on my own. The cabin was beautiful, I'll give it that. A classic A-frame with a massive deck and floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a frozen lake. It was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that hurts your ears at first because you're so used to city noise. I let myself in with the keypad code the host, a guy named Josh, had emailed me. Inside, it was freezing. The place smelled stale, like old pine and something else. Something faintly metallic, like copper. I figured it had just been closed up for a while. I cranked the thermostat, unpacked my gear in the loft bedroom, and poured a drink. The first odd thing happened that night. I was sitting on the couch downstairs, reading. It was around 11 p.m., The wind had picked up, whipping against the glass. I got up to grab a glass of water from the kitchen, and when I walked back into the living room, the vibe felt wrong. The rug near the back door was bunched up. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds. I am a neat freak. It's a habit from living alone in a small apartment. When I arrived, I had straightened that rug because it was crooked. Now, it was kicked up in the corner like someone had snagged their foot on it. I laughed it off. I told myself I must have kicked it on my way to the kitchen and just didn't notice. I fixed it, double-checked the deadbolt on the back door. It was locked tight, and went upstairs to bed. Sleep was impossible. The wind made the whole cabin groan. Every timber seemed to be shifting. I kept waking up, thinking I heard movement downstairs. Not the creaking of wood, but the soft, muffled thud of weight being displaced, like footsteps on a carpet. Every time I strained to listen, silence rushed back in. I eventually passed out around 4 a.m. out of sheer exhaustion. The next morning, the sun was blinding off the snow. The anxieties of the night before felt stupid in the daylight. I made coffee and decided to go for a hike around the property. The snow was knee-deep, so it was a workout. I did a big loop around the lake, enjoying the stinging cold air. I got back to the cabin around 2 p.m. and froze on the porch. The front door was unlocked. I distinctly remembered punching the code to lock it. I have a routine: wallet, keys, phone, lock. I stood there, hand on the handle, feeling my stomach drop. I pushed the door open and called out, "Hello?" Nothing but silence. I walked in, adrenaline dumping into my system. I checked every room: the closet, the bathroom, under the kitchen island. Empty. I went upstairs and checked under the bed. Nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to rationalize it. Maybe the lock mechanism was frozen? Maybe I just thought I heard the beep, but didn't. The mind will do incredible gymnastics to avoid accepting danger. I decided to stay. I wasn't going to let a faulty lock ruin my trip. I wedged a heavy dining chair under the front door handle and put my toolbox in front of the back door. If anyone tried to get in, they'd have to make a heckload of noise. The rest of the day, I was jumpy. I kept catching movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked, it was just a shadow or a tree branch swaying outside. Night fell hard and fast. By 5 p.m., it was pitch black. I made dinner, but didn't have much of an appetite. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the snow fall outside. It was coming down heavy now, a real blizzard. I could barely see the tree line. Around 9 p.m., I needed to use the bathroom. The bathroom was on the ground floor, just off the kitchen. I did my business, washed my hands, and reached for the towel. It was damp. Not just a little moist from the humidity. It was wet. Specifically, the center of the hand towel was soaked, like someone had just wiped their face or hands on it. I hadn't used that bathroom since the morning. I had been using the half bath upstairs. The hair on the back of my neck stood up so fast it hurt. I wasn't alone. I backed out of the bathroom, eyes scanning the dark kitchen. The shadows stretched long and thin across the floor. I didn't yell out this time. I knew nobody was going to answer. I bolted upstairs to the loft, grabbed my car keys and my knife, a small folding thing I use for opening packages, useless for defense, and sat on the bed. My plan was simple: wait until morning, then get the heck out. I wasn't driving down that unplowed road in a blizzard at night. I sat there for hours. My phone had 0 bars. The Wi-Fi was down, probably from the storm. I was completely cut off. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft noise. It came from the vents. A sound so quiet, I almost missed it. Cough. It was a wet, suppressed cough, and it came from directly beneath me. The cabin didn't have a basement. I had checked the listing. It was built on a concrete slab, or at least, that's what I thought. I got on my hands and knees and put my ear to the floorboards. I heard rustling, fabric rubbing against wood. Then a voice, a low murmuring whisper. It sounded like someone talking to themselves. Cold, it's too cold. I didn't wait. I didn't pack. I didn't care about the snow or the dark. I grabbed my jacket and my boots. I crept down the stairs, skipping the squeaky step I had memorized earlier. I made it to the living room. I looked at the rug near the back door, the one I had fixed the night before. It was moved again, pulled back completely. Beneath where the rug usually sat, there was a square cut into the floorboards, a trap door. It was propped open about an inch. A faint, flickering orange light, like a candle, was glowing from underneath. The smell hit me then, that metallic, musky smell from the first day, but stronger. It was the smell of unwashed bodies and filth. I froze, staring at the gap in the floor. As I watched, long, pale fingers curled around the edge of the trap door. They were filthy, the nails black with grime. The trapdoor started to rise, inch by inch, slowly, like whoever was down there was trying to be silent. I didn't stick around to see the face. I sprinted for the front door, kicked the chair away, and burst out into the snow. I didn't even button my coat. I jumped into my truck, locked the doors, and prayed it would start. The engine turned over, roaring to life. As I threw it into reverse, my headlights swept across the front of the cabin. Standing in the massive floor-to-ceiling window of the living room was a man. He was naked, skeletal, his skin practically gray. He was pressing his face against the glass, smiling. A wide, toothless smile. He waved at me, a slow, mocking wave. I drove like a maniac. I slid off the road twice, nearly hitting a pine tree, but I kept correcting and pushing forward. I didn't stop until I hit the main highway and saw the lights of a gas station. I called the police from the station's landline. I was shaking so bad I could barely hold the receiver. The state troopers went out there a few hours later. They found him. It turned out the guy had been living in the crawl space under the cabin for months. He had dug it out to make it deeper. He had a sleeping bag, mounds of trash, and a bucket for a toilet. He had been coming up into the cabin whenever guests were asleep or out hiking. But that's not the most disturbing part. I can handle the idea of a squatter. It's creepy, but it happens. The police asked me to come down to the station to identify some items they found in his nest to see if they were mine. There was a pile of stuff he'd stolen from previous renters: watches, jewelry, cash. Then the officer pulled out a digital camera. It wasn't mine. It was an old point-and-shoot model. "We found this down there," the officer said, looking uncomfortable. "We think you should see the last few photos." He handed me the camera. I clicked the review button. First photo was of me. I was asleep in the loft bed. The timestamp was 3:14 a.m. the previous night. The angle was from directly above, like he was standing over me on the bed. I clicked the next one. It was me sitting on the couch reading, taken from the hallway shadows. I clicked the last one. It was a selfie. The man was holding the camera up high. He was grinning that toothless grin. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was me. I was standing at the kitchen counter making coffee that first morning, completely oblivious. He was standing right behind me. I never went back for my stuff. I told them to burn it. I moved to an apartment in the city, somewhere with a doorman and 24-hour security. I don't do quiet anymore. Silence just reminds me of him listening from under the floorboards. And the worst part? The listing on the rental site is still there, but the host name has changed. Josh is gone. Now the host is listed as Thomas. I looked up the property records last week out of morbid curiosity. The owner of the cabin, a man named Thomas Gregory, died of a heart attack in that cabin 4 years ago. The cabin has been abandoned since then. So, who was emailing me the door codes? I don't know, and I'm never going to find out. I'm one of those world best when it's quiet. There's just something about the eastern Oregon desert at 3 a.m. that clears my head. I've been living in Bend for about 5 years, and when my job gets too stressful, I grab my keys, put on a hoodie, and drive. I don't plan where I'm going. I just pick a direction and drive until I'm almost out of gas or the sun starts to come up. Last January, we had this really bad cold snap, the kind that makes the plastic inside your car crack like it's going to break. It was a Tuesday, maybe 1:45 a.m., and I was driving east on Highway 20. If you haven't been out there, it's mostly nothing, just sagebrush, rocks, and a road that looks like it stretches forever into the dark. I have a 2017 Tacoma. Nothing special, but it handles snow well. I had the heater turned up so high I could have melted my shoes, listening to an old podcast, leaning back and watching the road lines disappear under my truck. The moon was tiny, so everything outside my headlights was just dark. I usually find it relaxing, but that night it felt different, like something was off. About 40 miles from town, I saw I was running out of gas faster than I thought. I was so lost in my thoughts that I missed my usual spot to turn around. There's this small gas station in the middle of nowhere near the mountains. It looks like it hasn't been updated since the 80s. 2 pumps, a flickering light over a rusty soda machine, and a small building that's always locked after midnight. You can only pay at the pump then. I pulled in, and the gravel crunched under my tires. It sounded super loud in the quiet desert. I got out, and the cold hit me hard. I could feel my nostrils stick together when I breathed. I quickly swiped my card, standing there with my hands in my pockets, watching the numbers go up on the pump. While I was there, I saw a car parked way at the edge of the lot, where the light faded into the bushes. It was an old sedan, maybe a late 90s Buick. The engine was off, the lights were out, and the windows were so frosted I couldn't see inside. It looked like it was abandoned, just a piece of junk left to freeze. The pump stopped, so I put the nozzle back, screwed on the gas cap, and was about to get back in my truck when I heard a noise from the Buick. It was a loud metal sound, like someone kicked the inside of the trunk. I stopped, my hand on the door. I'm no hero, and I've seen enough weird stuff on these roads to know it's best to mind your own business. I stared at the car for a few seconds. Nothing moved. I thought maybe the cold was affecting the metal, or a coyote was messing around under the car. I got in my truck, locked the doors, and made a U-turn to go back to Bend. I'd been driving for maybe 10 minutes when I looked in my rearview mirror. There were headlights behind me, far back, maybe half a mile, but they were there. It was strange because I hadn't seen anyone on the road for the past hour. Didn't think too much about it. People live out here, and maybe someone was going to town early. I stayed at the speed limit, just driving along. But the headlights started getting closer, fast. Soon they were right behind me, so close that I couldn't see their bumper. I tapped my brakes to give them a hint, but they didn't move back. They even started swerving a little, like they were trying to see around my truck. I was getting scared. I sped up a bit, going to 60, then 65. The car stayed right behind me, matching my speed every time. I couldn't see the driver because of their bright high beams, which they'd just turned on. The light was reflecting off my mirrors, blinding me, so I had to flip the tab on my rear view to see. Then they started honking, not a quick beep, but a long, loud blast that just stayed in the cold air. I was getting mad. I thought it was some drunk or a stupid kid. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but I had no service. I was on my own. I decided to try to get away. There are some old logging roads that connect to the highway about 20 miles outside of Bend. I knew them well from hunting. I figured I could turn off the road, kill my lights, and let them drive past. I saw the turn coming up, a sharp right onto a gravel road. I didn't use my blinker. At the last second, I slammed on the brakes, shifted down, and turned the Tacoma onto the dirt road. The back of the truck slid a little, but I caught it. I drove in about 100 yards, pulled behind some pine trees, and turned off the engine and lights. I sat there in the quiet. My breath started to fog up the windshield. I watched the highway through the trees. A few seconds later, the sedan sped past. I saw its taillights and knew it was the same old Buick from the gas station. It was flying, probably doing 80, heading toward town. I let out a breath. I waited for 10 minutes for the adrenaline to wear off. I felt dumb for getting so worked up, but it's better to be safe. I decided to wait another 5 minutes to make sure they weren't coming back. The truck was getting cold fast. I reached for the ignition to leave, but then I heard a noise. It was coming from the back of my truck, a soft, wet, sliding sound, followed by a small shaking that I could feel through my seat. I didn't move. My skin felt freezing. I slowly grabbed my flashlight from the center. I didn't turn it on yet, just held it. I remembered the Buick at the gas station and the sound from the trunk. And I remembered that when I was getting gas, I left my tailgate down. I'd been hauling wood that day and forgot to close it. I moved my side mirror to see into the truck bed. The moon shone on something, a shape. It wasn't wood. It was dark, huddled against the back window, right behind my head. I didn't think, I just reacted. I threw the door open and jumped out of the truck, falling in the snow. I stood up, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the back of the Tacoma. The light shone on a man. He was skinny, wearing only a tattered shirt and torn jeans. His skin was gray from the cold. He was curled up in my truck bed, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He didn't look like he would hurt someone. He looked like he was dying. I stood there, my mind trying to understand what was happening. I started to move toward him, thinking I needed to get him into the cab before he froze. But then I heard another car on the highway. It was the Buick. It had turned around and was coming onto the logging road, its headlights shining through the trees. The man in my truck heard the lights and made a whimpering sound. He jumped out of the truck, not even looking at me, and ran into the trees like an animal. The Buick stopped about 20 feet away. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was big, wearing a heavy jacket and holding a spotlight. He shined it in my face, blinding me. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked around, with the light. I stood there with my hands up, feeling like my heart was jumping out of my chest. He asked if I'd seen where he went. I was confused. I asked him who he was talking about. The big man stepped closer. The light hit the back of his car. The trunk was open. There were zip ties around the latch, and the trunk was lined with plastic. He said that his friend liked to wander off, and that it wasn't safe for him in the cold. He told me to get back in my truck and drive away, and forget I even stopped at the gas station. I looked at the open trunk, then at the dark woods where the man ran. The big man started walking toward the trees, not even looking at me. He had duct tape sticking out of his pocket. I didn't stay to see what happened. I jumped back in my Tacoma, put it in gear, and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I saw the streetlights of Bend. I went straight to the police station and told them everything about the gas station, the Buick, the man in my truck, and the guy with the spotlight. 2 days later, a detective called me. They went to the gas station, but the Buick was gone. They found something in the bushes near the logging road, a shallow grave. It hadn't been used yet. They never found the man, and they never found the Buick. The detective said they thought it was connected to disappearances of workers in Idaho. I still go for drives sometimes. I still like the empty roads and the quiet desert. But now I know that when the world is quiet, it's not only peaceful people who are out there. Some people are looking for things that we shouldn't even know exist. I still get hung up on the fact that I didn't even hesitate to stop. This happened when I was 32. I was living in upstate New York, and my job had me driving between small towns a lot. Mostly maintenance stuff, inspections sometimes. Nothing crazy. Just a lot of empty roads, you know? Winter that year was awful, with snowstorm after snowstorm. The plows were struggling, and there were stretches where you wouldn't see another car for like 20 minutes. This was one of those nights. I just wrapped up a late job outside a town I'd never even heard of before. It was almost 10 p.m. when I left. It started snowing again while I was working, a light but steady snow. By the time I got to the main road, everything looked flat and washed out. The GPS said I had about 45 minutes to home, mostly back roads through woods and farmland. No streetlights, just those reflective markers and whatever my headlights could pick up. About 15 minutes in, I saw a car pulled over ahead with its hazard lights on. It was a dark sedan, already half buried in snow, with the driver's side door open. I slowed down without even thinking. You don't see that every night, especially in that kind of weather. As I got closer, I saw a guy standing outside the car, facing away from the road. He had a coat on with the hood up and his hands in his pockets. He wasn't waving or anything, just standing there. I thought I'd slow down, crack the window, ask if he needed help, and then leave. Simple enough. I stopped a few car lengths ahead of him, leaving my engine running. I rolled the window down just enough to talk, and cold air rushed in right away. I asked if he was okay. He slowly turned his head toward me. I couldn't see his face, just the shape of it under the hood. He said his car died, and his phone was dead too. His voice sounded normal, calm, maybe a little flat, but that could have been from the cold. I asked where he was going, and he named a town about 10 miles back the way I had come, which made sense. I said I could call someone for him, or give him a ride to the next town where there was a gas station open late. He paused for a while, long enough that I wondered if he had heard me. Then he asked if he could just sit in my car for a minute to get warm. That's when I hesitated. I don't know why, really. It seemed harmless enough. Freezing night, stranded driver, empty road. But something about him stepping so close to my door without me asking felt wrong. I told him I could drive him, but he had to leave his car. I wasn't sticking around for long. He paused again, then said that was fine. I unlocked the passenger door. As soon as he got in, I noticed how little snow was on him, just a dusting on his shoulders. His boots were wet, but not soaked. If he had been standing out there for long, he should have been covered in snow. The other thing I noticed was the smell. Not sweat or smoke, but something sharp and metallic, mixed with cold cloth. Couldn't place it, and it didn't smell like someone who had just been sitting in a dead car. He shut the door carefully and put on his seatbelt without me even saying anything. He kept his hands in his pockets. We started driving. I told him I'd drop him at the gas station. He nodded. No thank you, no nothing. The road was quiet, and the snow was coming down harder. My headlights lit up the flakes like static. I started trying to make conversation, asking how long he'd been stuck. He said he wasn't sure. I asked if anyone knew where he was. He said no. His answers were short, but he wasn't dodging the questions. He just seemed empty, like he was just repeating things without thinking. A few minutes went by in silence. I started to relax a little, thinking I was just overreacting. Then he asked me a question. He asked how long I'd lived around here. The way he asked it got my attention. It wasn't casual, it was measured, like he was checking something off a list. I told him I'd lived here for a couple of years. He nodded slowly, staring straight ahead. Then he asked if I lived alone. That's when I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I didn't answer right away. I asked why. He said he was just curious, that it gets lonely out here. I laughed it off and gave him a vague answer, not confirming anything. After that, I didn't say anything. I glanced at him a few times. He hadn't moved, still facing forward with his hood up and hands in his pockets. Then I noticed that his seatbelt wasn't actually clicked in. It was pulled across him, but the latch was just resting near the buckle. I don't know why that stood out, but it did. We were about 5 minutes from the gas station when the GPS rerouted us. Road closure ahead, probably an accident. It told me to take a smaller side road to get back on track. I hesitated. That road went through a wooded area with no houses for miles. I told him we had to take a detour. He said okay, too fast. I turned onto the side road. The trees closed in immediately, and the snow was piled high on the sides. The plows hadn't been through there recently. My headlights made a narrow path through the dark. That's when he moved in his seat. It was just a small movement. His hand came out of his pocket for a second, then went back in. I told myself to stay calm and not assume anything. Another minute went by. Then he asked if I ever picked up strangers. I really didn't like that. I told him not usually, and he nodded again. The road curved a bit, so I couldn't see past the bend. That's when I saw another car up ahead, partly blocking the road. It was parked sideways this time, with the lights off and snow piling up against the doors. I slowed down fast. My heart started pounding before I even knew why. I told him that wasn't good, and that I had to turn around. He didn't say anything. I glanced at him. He was looking at the car, really looking at it. His head was tilted like he was sizing it up. I slowed to a stop, keeping some distance. The silence in the car was heavy. I told him we'd back up and find another way. That's when he finally turned his head toward me. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it changed his whole face. He said it was okay, that I could just drive around it. I told him there wasn't enough room. He said there was. I shook my head and put the car in reverse. His hand came out of his pocket and rested on his thigh. That's when I saw what he was holding. It wasn't a gun or a knife, just something smaller, metal, and shiny. I didn't wait to see what it was. I slammed the car into drive and hit the gas, my tires spinning before they caught. The car lurched forward, and I swerved, barely missing the parked car. I didn't look back. I didn't care if I scratched the paint or messed something up underneath. He grabbed the door handle. Not hard, just calmly, like he thought it would open. He didn't raise his voice, but told me to slow down. After that, I did something stupid, but it felt right. I jerked the wheel hard to the right. The car fishtailed and snow flew up everywhere. He was thrown sideways and his grip slipped. The door flew open. He tumbled out onto the road, rolled once, and slid into the snowbank. I didn't stop. I drove until my hands were numb and my chest was burning. I didn't slow down until I hit a main road with traffic. I went straight to the police station. They took my statement seriously, maybe too seriously. They sent a car out to the area right away. They didn't find him. They did find the first car. It wasn't broken down, nothing wrong with it at all. The second car was gone. The officer told me something that still bugs me. He said there had been stories about it along that road over the past few winters. Drivers picking someone up, feeling uneasy, getting asked weird questions. Most of them never saw that person again. Until today, I keep thinking the car's door. I don't know why it slid open. I can't decide if I was lucky and got rid of someone with bad intentions, or if this man was mentally ill and he was the one who opened the door. I still think about this every winter, especially when heavy snow makes everything quiet outside. I had this experience a few years ago when I was 31. I was living alone in a small, cheap rental house in northern Michigan. It wasn't fancy. It was a one-story place with a detached garage and woods on 3 sides. The long gravel driveway never got plowed unless I did it. I liked it that way because it was quiet and I had no neighbors close enough to bother me. That winter was tough, even for Michigan. Some weeks, the temperature barely got above 0. The snowbanks were taller than my truck, and the wind made the house creak like it was falling apart. I worked maintenance at a local hospital, mostly nights. I usually got home around 2 or 3 in the morning. The roads were empty then, and it felt like the world had shut down. That night started like any other. I clocked out a little late and got gas on the way home. I noticed the snow was coming down harder than they'd said. It wasn't a blizzard, but the thick flakes stuck to everything. By the time I turned onto my road, the tire tracks were filling in. I thought I should shovel when I got home, but I was tired and cold. I figured I'd do it in the morning. As I pulled in, the headlights caught something near the edge of my driveway. At first, it was just moving. I thought it was probably a deer, since we had a lot of them out there. But it didn't move like a deer. It didn't run or freeze. It just shifted a little, like someone adjusting themselves. I stopped the truck halfway up the driveway, leaving the engine running and the lights on the tree line. After a few seconds, I realized it was a person, a man, standing just inside the trees about 20 or 25 feet away. He was wearing dark winter clothes with his hood up and his hands at his sides. He wasn't waving or coming closer, but just standing there. I thought maybe someone's car had broken down because cell service was spotty. I opened the window a bit and waited for him to say something. He didn't. I shut off the engine and got out, leaving the truck door open. Snow was already getting inside my collar. I asked if he needed help, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond. I took a few steps closer, stopping where the snow wasn't too deep. He wasn't deep in the woods. He was right there, just far enough back that the shadows made it hard to see him. I could see his heavy jacket now, and his boots in the snow. He looked ready for anything, more so than someone whose car just broke down. I asked again if he was okay. Still nothing, not even a nod. He didn't seem to notice me. The snow softened everything, but I could see him breathing slowly and calmly. I suddenly felt that something was wrong. I told him I was going inside and could call someone if he needed help. I didn't wait for an answer, just got back in the truck and drove up to the house. I kept my headlights on the driveway before, shutting them off. When it was dark, I couldn't see him anymore. Inside, I locked the door. I stood there with my coat on, listening. The house was quiet, except for the heater. I told myself I was overreacting, and that he was probably just a hunter or someone walking property lines. Still, I checked the windows. I could see the driveway from the living room, but not the trees. Nothing moved, and there were no footprints. I made dinner, turned on the TV, and tried to forget about it. Maybe half an hour later, I was rinsing a plate when I saw something through the kitchen window, a shape near the garage. At first, I thought it was just snow. Then it moved a little, not walking or crouching, just a small change like before. It was the same guy, closer than I liked. He was maybe 15 feet from the garage door, standing in the open. The garage lights were off, so he was half in shadow. I still couldn't see his face. I didn't move, just watched him for 10 seconds, waiting for him to do something. He didn't knock, wave, or try the garage door, but just stood there, facing the house. I realized he'd been waiting, not lost or stranded. I turned off the kitchen light and backed away from the window. My heart started to beat faster. I grabbed my phone and checked for a signal. 1 bar, maybe. I went to the bedroom and grabbed the old baseball bat from the closet. It was better than nothing. Then I checked the front door camera on my phone. The driveway was empty. I checked the backyard camera next. A snow-covered yard, no movement. Garage cam, nothing. For a second, I wondered if I had imagined him. Then the side camera loaded. He was right outside the side door, close enough that the camera made him look weird. I could see the fabric of his jacket. He was looking at the door and tilted his head like he was listening. My stomach dropped. I stayed still, barely breathing, and watched the feed. He didn't touch the handle or knock, but just stood there for about 30 seconds. Then he took a slow step back, then another, and disappeared. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. No footsteps or door rattling, just the snow and the house. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on and the bat close by, watching the cameras until morning. When the sun was up, I went outside. The snow had stopped, and everything looked clean. But there were footprints that went straight out of the woods, paused at the driveway, and went toward the house. They circled it, slowly and carefully, at every window and door. Then they went back into the trees. What bothered me was how evenly spaced the footprints were. He didn't slip or hesitate. He knew where he was going, even in the dark and snow. I called the sheriff, who came out, looked around, and asked questions. He didn't seem too concerned, but said a few people in the area had reported similar things, like people watching houses during snowstorms. No break-ins or fights, just close calls. Before he left, he asked if I was missing anything. I said no. Later, I went to the garage and saw that the lock on the side door was unlocked. I never used that door. I moved out 2 months later, even though it was still winter. I still don't know who that guy was or what he wanted. He got close enough to do something but didn't. That bothers me more than if he had somehow. I never cared about the cold until last winter. Now when it gets cold and I see my breath, I get this terrible feeling in my stomach that won't go away. I used to work, security for a delivery company in Minnesota. It's one of those huge centers out in the middle of nowhere, with fields all around that freeze over in winter. The job was boring most of the time. I would sit in a little shack, check in truck drivers, and walk the area every couple of hours. Most nights, it was hard to stay awake and not freeze outside. It was mid-January when we got that really cold weather. The air hurt to breathe. My coworker was sick, so I worked a double shift. I needed the extra money for bills, so I thought, why not? It's easy. At 2 a.m., the place was quiet. Trucks weren't due until 5 a.m., so it was just me, the lights, and the wind against the building. I was in the shack, on my phone and drinking coffee, when I saw something on the screens. We have cameras everywhere, but the picture isn't good, especially at night with the snow. Camera 4 shows the loading dock on the east side, which we almost never use in winter because the doors freeze shut. I saw something move on the screen. It was just a shadow near the trash cans. I didn't think of an intruder. I thought coyotes. They come around looking for food. But I had to check it out. I grabbed my flashlight, put on my coat, and went outside. The wind was awful. I walked through the snow toward the east side, my boots sounding way too loud. When I got to the dock, everything was normal. The snow was smooth. No coyote tracks, no footprints, just snow. I thought the wind must have blown something, or a tarp came loose. I shone my light around and checked the doors. They were shut. I turned to go back when I heard a sound. It was a metal clink. It sounded like it was coming from inside. That stopped me. The building is locked up at night. The manager leaves at 6 p.m., and only security and the cleaning crew, who left hours ago, can get in. I walked to the door next to the docks. I tried the handle. Locked. I used my badge, the light turned green, and I opened it. The door opened, and I walked into the building. If you haven't been in one of those centers at night, it's scary. There are rows of shelves stacked with stuff going up high. The lights turn on only where you're walking, so it's dark all around you. I shouted to see if anyone was there. My voice echoed, and then went quiet. No one answered. I walked down the aisle, shining my light. I told myself it was just the pipes or a pallet moving. But then I saw something. Down the way, in aisle 12, the lights were on. I hadn't been there. No one had. The lights turn off after 10 minutes. So someone had been in aisle 12 recently. I got my pepper spray. We can't have guns, which is dumb since we're so far out. I walked to aisle 12, trying to be quiet, which is hard on the floor. When I turned the corner, it was empty. Just electronics and car parts. I walked around, checking behind things. Nothing. The lights blinked. I was about to call it in when I saw something on the floor near the back. It was a wrapper, a burger wrapper. I picked it up. It was greasy. My heart raced. We don't let food on the floor because of rats. The day guys wouldn't leave this. Someone was inside. I reached for my radio to call the cops, but I heard the sound again. It was closer. It came from the next aisle, aisle 13. I didn't shout this time. I went to the end and looked around the corner. The lights in aisle 13 were off. It was dark. I turned on my light and shone it down the row. For a second, it just shone on dust. Then it landed on something halfway down. A forklift was in the middle of the aisle. That wasn't right. The charging station is on the other side. They don't leave them in the aisles. I walked toward it, my light shaking. I saw that the seat was wet. Not oil or water. It was snow. Someone had climbed onto the forklift. I shone my light up. The stuff on the top, way up high, had been moved. There was a space between boxes of batteries, big enough for someone to get in. I backed away, watching that space. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was looking at me from up there. I reached for my radio, my fingers shaking. Then water hit my face. I wiped it off and looked at my hand. It was dirty slush. I looked up again, and I saw a face. It was upside down, looking over the edge. He was pale, with messy hair, and his eyes were wide, shining in the light. He wasn't moving. He was just looking at me, silent, above me. I didn't ask who he was. I ran. I ran down the aisle, my boots loud. I heard a thud, someone jumping and running. I didn't look back. I ran to the door, opened it, and ran out. I reached for my keys to lock it, but I dropped them in the snow. I picked them up. I heard the door handle shaking. He was right there. I grabbed the keys, left the door, and ran to the shack. The wind was loud, but I knew the way. I ran inside and slammed the door, locking it. I grabbed the phone to call 911. It was dead. I got my cell phone. No service. The weather must have taken out a tower. It happens. I was stuck. I sat in the corner, watching the door, holding my flashlight. I watched the screens, trying to find him. Camera 4, empty. Camera 5, empty. Inside camera 1, empty. I checked camera 2, which shows the door I had run out of. The door was open. He wasn't inside anymore. He was out here, with me. I turned and checked the windows. If he wanted in, he could get in. I turned off the lights so he couldn't see me. I hid below the window, listening. For 20 minutes, I heard only the wind. Then, I heard a tap. It wasn't on the door. It wasn't on the window. It was on the floor, below me. The shack is up off the ground, so snow doesn't get in. There's a space under it for electrical stuff. He was right under me. I held my breath. I could hear him moving around down there. Then, the vent rattled. I watched as the screws started to turn. He wasn't using a tool. I saw a knife blade pushing through, turning the screw. He was coming up through the floor. I left. I didn't care about the job. I ran to my truck. I started it and drove away, sliding on the ice. I drove until I got a signal and called the police. They met me at the center later. They searched the place. They found the nest up on the pallets. They found sleeping bags and food. But when they checked the shack, the officer called me over. He looked scared. "You were in here for how long?" he asked. "About 6 hours," I said, "since I started." He pointed to the space under the shack. The door, which is always locked, had been forced open. Inside were cigarette butts and a spot where someone had been lying. The snow around the door was untouched, except for tracks to the building. The officer looked at me and said, "These cigarettes are old, but the tracks are new." That's when I realized he hadn't broken in and chased me. He had been living under the shack for weeks. He was right under me every night. He only went inside that night because he needed food. The clink was him trying to sneak back out before I saw him. I quit the next day. I don't think I will ever work as a security again. Okay, so this happened a few winters back, around 2024, while I was staying in a pretty isolated spot in northern Pennsylvania. I'm 31 now, but back then, I just wanted to get away for a month to get some freelance work done without getting bugged. My uncle has this place, one of those homes that's all fancy and modern, mostly glass. It looks great in pictures, but when you're in the middle of nowhere and it's super dark at 2 a.m., those big windows feel like a bad idea. You feel like you're in a fishbowl where anything can see you, but you can only see your reflection. That night, the storm was a real monster. The wind was slamming the house so hard that the glass was shaking. I was already a little jumpy because the power kept going on and off. I was at the kitchen counter with my laptop and a cold coffee, trying to work. when I heard a sound that didn't fit the storm. It wasn't a branch hitting the roof or the wind. It was a heavy, steady thumping, like someone was kicking a rug and it was coming from the deck. I froze. I didn't want to turn off the lights and look scared, so I stood up slowly and looked at the glass doors to the deck. It was a complete whiteout. I could only see a few feet to the railing, and even that was blurry. I thought it was just some patio furniture I forgot to put away, like a chair getting blown around. I almost went to bed, but the thumping kept going. 3 hits, then a pause, then 3 more. It felt too planned. I grabbed a big flashlight from the drawer. I didn't have a gun, which felt like a mistake. I walked to the glass door, my heart pounding. I remember feeling stupid, standing there in my pajamas, staring into the snow. I turned on the flashlight and pressed it to the glass to see better. At first, I just saw snow everywhere. Then, at the edge of the light, I saw a pair of boots. They were just sitting on the deck, maybe 4 feet from the door. No person, just the boots. I blinked, thinking I was seeing things, but they were there. Heavy, tan work boots, covered in snow. They were standing straight, facing the house. I backed away, feeling scared. I thought maybe my uncle left them there, but I'd been there for 2 weeks, and the deck was clear. Then, as I watched, one of the boots fell over. It didn't blow over. It looked like it was kicked. That's when I knew the thumping wasn't furniture. Someone was out there, messing with me, throwing boots or moving them to get a reaction. I ran to the front door to lock it, then checked all the windows. The problem with a glass house is there are so many ways to get in, and most of the locks are weak. I was in the hallway when the power went out, total dark. All I could hear was the wind and my breathing, which was too fast. I was really scared. I stood there listening. After about 10 minutes, the thumping started again, but it was on the roof this time. It sounded like someone was crawling on the roof, dragging something heavy. I kept the flashlight off. I went into the living room, where the ceiling is high, and looked up at the skylights. They were covered in snow, but I saw dark streaks where something cleared the snow. A bare hand wiped a circle in the frost. I saw an eye looking down. Just one eye, wide and bloodshot, looking into the dark room. I gasped. I backed into the kitchen, tripping over a stool. The eye disappeared. I heard a thump as someone jumped from the roof onto the deck. I knew I had to leave. If they broke the glass, I was trapped. I grabbed my keys and boots, not even putting them on right. If I could get to the garage, I could drive away. I ran to the mudroom, which connects to the garage. I opened the door, hit the garage door button, and jumped in the car. The garage door started to open slowly, struggling against the snow. It got about 2 feet up and stopped. I hit the button again. Nothing. I looked in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw something that made my blood froze. A man was in the back seat of my car. He didn't have a weapon. He was just sitting there, shivering, wearing a thin flannel shirt and jeans. He looked like he was 60, with gray hair, and his skin was pale. I screamed and fell out of the car. I thought he'd attack me, but he didn't move. He just stared at the back of the headrest. I tried to run back to the house, but then he spoke. He whispered, "He won't let me back in." I stopped. I was shaking. "Who won't let you in?" I yelled. The man turned his head to the garage door window. I looked too. In the driveway, in the snow, was another man. He was taller, wearing a dark coat and holding a long metal bar. He wasn't moving, just watching the garage. I understood. The guy in my car wasn't the bad guy. He was a neighbor. I'd seen his mailbox, and he'd been chased from his home. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was trying to live. I looked back at the guy in the car. He was crying. Then I looked back at the driveway. The tall guy started walking toward the garage, dragging the metal bar. The sound scraped against the ground, even over the wind. I reacted fast. I pulled the manual release cord for the garage door and pulled the door down. I locked it and ran back to the house, locking the mudroom door. I grabbed the old man and pulled him inside. We spent the night in the kitchen, away from the windows, holding a knife and a flashlight. The tall guy walked around the house for hours. We could hear him tapping on the glass, not breaking it, just tapping. Every few minutes at a different window. He wanted us to know he was there and to stay awake. When the sun came up and the storm stopped, he was gone. There were just tracks in the snow circling the house like a cage. We called the police, and they found the old man's house a few miles away. The front door was off its hinges, unscrewed, and leaned against the house. The police never found the guy with the metal bar. They found the neighbor's dog in the woods, though. I'm back in a city apartment now, on the 4th floor, with one door and a deadbolt I check every night. I still think about that tapping on the glass. It wasn't someone trying to get in. It was someone reminding you that they're still outside. This happened in January 2023. I was 30, living near Omaha, Nebraska. My sister needed help moving some stuff up in a small town close to the South Dakota border before a storm. We finished, and the sky was that weird purple color that tells you to get off the road. Like an idiot, thinking my old 4Runner was unstoppable, I decided to drive the 4 hours home instead of sleeping on her couch. About 2 hours in, the weather went from bad to awful. The wind out there doesn't just blow, it shoves. It hit the side of my truck so hard I had to turn the wheel just to stay in my lane. No streetlights, no other cars, just me and this wall of white. I was on this 2-lane highway, stuck between miles of frozen cornfields, when I spotted hazard lights. They were faint, maybe a quarter mile ahead. Getting closer, I saw a silver car sideways, half stuck in a snowdrift across the road. I slowed down, my heart pounding, knowing I was getting into something. I stopped about 20 feet back, leaving my engine running and headlights on the car. I didn't see anyone inside. The windows were frosted, and the hazards flashed like the battery was dying. I sat there, thinking. My gut said, drive around and call it in when I got a signal, but I thought about some poor grandma freezing because I was too scared to check. I won't lie, I felt like a hero for about 5 seconds before stepping out into the wind. The cold hit hard. It froze my nose hairs and scraped my lungs. I walked to the silver car, my boots sinking deep. I knocked on the driver's window. No one moved. I cleared some frost and looked inside. The car was empty. Not just no people, but nothing at all. No cables, no bags, no trash. It looked like a clean rental car. But the keys were in the ignition, turned on, which is why the hazards were flashing. I tried the door. It was open. I reached in to turn off the lights, not wanting the battery to die if the owner was nearby, but then I saw something on the passenger seat. A cell phone, screen up. It was recording. I picked it up, my hands shaking from the cold. The camera app was open, and the timer showed it had been recording for over 40 minutes. The screen showed me. Well, it showed the view out the passenger window, pointed right at my truck and where I'd been sitting. I felt a huge rush, that fight or flight thing. I dropped the phone and backed away. I turned around, squinting, but the snow made it hard to see. Just gray, white, and quiet, except for the wind. I turned to run back to my 4Runner, but stopped. My headlights were still on, but there was someone right in front of my truck. It was a man, but not dressed for Nebraska in January. He had on a light jean jacket and a hoodie. He just stood there in my headlights, still staring through my windshield at the empty seat. He had his hands in his pockets, leaning forward like he was waiting for a joke. I didn't say anything, not even hey. The way he stood, not bothered by the cold, freaked me out. I grabbed my keys, seeing my truck door was open. I started circling the silver car, keeping it between me and him. He didn't turn to follow. He just stared at my truck. I took more steps, my heart pounding. When I got to the back of the silver car, I ran for it. I jumped for my door, but as soon as I moved, so did he. Not running, but lunging, like a dog going after a fly. He reached my truck at the same time I did. I slammed the door and hit the locks. Right after, his face was against the glass. I've seen some messed up stuff, but his face stuck with me. He wasn't mad. He was smiling. Not a nice smile, but a wide, crazy smile that didn't reach his eyes. His skin was pale blue from the cold, and his lips were cracked and bleeding, but he didn't seem to care. He started hitting the glass with his forehead. I threw the truck into reverse and went. The tires spun, kicking up snow before grabbing. I backed up fast, going around the silver car, pulling forward. I looked in the mirror. He wasn't chasing me. He was by the silver car, picking up the phone I dropped. He looked at my taillights and waved. It was a slow wave. I drove for 30 miles without looking back, gripping the wheel. I didn't stop until I saw a gas station with lights and people. I went inside, looking crazy, and told the cashier about the car on the highway and to call the cops. I didn't say anything about the guy. I didn't know how to describe him without sounding nuts. I sat there for an hour, waiting for my heart to slow down. I thought about the phone. Why was it recording? Why was he waiting for me? The more I thought, the more I knew the silver car wasn't stuck. It was a trap. He'd been waiting for someone to stop. A week later, I saw a missing person thing on the news. A guy disappeared from a town near where I'd been, but the guy in the picture wasn't the guy I saw. The guy in the picture was a college kid, maybe 22. I kept reading. They found the kid's car, a silver car. The police said it was working fine, but the battery was dead because the hazards were on. My stomach dropped. I knew then that the guy in the jean jacket wasn't the owner of the silver car. He was the reason why the owner was gone. He'd used that kid's car to trick me, like he probably tricked the kid. He was filming the people he took. I told the police, but what could they do? I saw a guy in a jean jacket during a blizzard. They looked, but the snow had covered everything. No body, no one. Just an empty silver car and a missing kid. They never found the missing kid. But I am deeply sure that if I hadn't moved fast that night, there would be 2 missing persons. I'm 34 now, but it all went down about 4 years ago during the holidays. I drove all the way to my parents in a small Montana town to surprise them for Christmas. It was a fun week with my family, but I had to head back to my real life eventually. The drive home was about 16 hours. Some people hate long drives, but I didn't mind it too much. I liked napping at rest stops instead of spending money on hotels. All I wanted was to get home. I left my parents' place that afternoon, earlier than I planned. There was a report about a big snowstorm heading my way, and I thought I could get ahead of it if I left early. For the first few hours, it was not bad. But about 4 or 5 hours into the drive, the storm got me. It wasn't gradual. The road went from clear to covered in snow in minutes. The wind was the worst. It pushed my car around and threw snow at my windshield so hard I could barely see. I still had control, and the road was empty, so I kept going. After an hour of fighting the wheel and squinting, I got really tired. My phone started blowing up with winter storm alerts. Then I lost service. That's when things turned dangerous. Being stuck with no way to call for help if I crashed was scary. I decided to pull into the next rest stop a few miles ahead. It was an empty, quiet place off the highway among some trees. The parking lot was covered in snow. There was one other car parked far away. It looked like it had been there before the storm because of the thick layer of snow on it. As soon as I parked, the weather got worse. It became a total whiteout. I couldn't even see the other car anymore, and the wind shook my car. I sat there for an hour, waiting for it to stop. I was tired, and I really needed the bathroom, so I went to the service building. When I stepped out of the car, the wind felt like it was cutting me. I ran to the building and got inside. The lobby was small. It had benches, old maps, and restroom doors. The heat worked, so I stayed there to warm up. I looked out the window and could barely see the other car. It didn't look like it was on, which was weird. It was freezing outside. If someone was in that car without heat, they would be freezing. I went to the men's room and pushed the door. It opened an inch before slamming shut. I pushed again, but it wouldn't move. It wasn't locked. It felt like someone was on the other side, holding it shut. I just stood there, shocked. I thought about using the women's room, but I felt dread. Something was off. There was no reason for someone to block the door. I didn't wait to ask why. I ran back to my car. As I left, I heard the bathroom door open, but I didn't turn around. I got into my car, my heart racing. The parking lot had so much snow. I didn't know if I could drive out without getting stuck. I wanted to leave, but I was scared of getting stuck near the building. A few minutes later, I saw someone moving through the whiteout between my car and the building. He stopped and stood there while on the phone, looking at me. He started pacing, getting closer to my car. It seemed like he was trying to act natural, but he wanted to get to me. When he got close, I saw him looking into my window. Then, he did something that scared me. He smiled really big and walked to my window. He started tapping on the glass, grinning while the wind howled. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't move. He started knocking harder, almost breaking the glass. Then I saw another man running from the rest stop toward us. That woke me up. I put the car in reverse and hit the gas. The tires spun in the snow. I wasn't moving. The second guy got closer. Then the tires grabbed the road and the car moved back. I was shifting into drive when the guy from the building threw a knife at my windshield. It bounced off, but it cracked the glass. I drove like crazy in the storm, hoping I wouldn't crash. I was sure they would follow me, but I didn't see any lights. I drove until the storm cleared and I had service. Then I called the police. By the time the cops got to the rest stop, the men were gone. But they found the other car. It was still there, untouched. It didn't belong to the men who attacked me. The police showed me a photo of the owner, and I'd never seen him. The guy had been missing for days. He'd been on a road trip, and his family thought he was just sleeping, but no one heard from him. I think something bad happened at that rest stop before I got there. I think the two men worked together. One was a lookout, and the other was inside. The guy inside blocked the door because he was busy with the other driver. If I had gotten into that bathroom, I don't think I'd be here now. They would not let me leave after seeing what was behind that door. I used to think winter storms were no big deal. People freak out, stores sell out of milk, and most times it's just a few inches of snow and some icy roads. That way of thinking almost got me killed. I was 31, living alone in northern Michigan, way up where winter isn't just a season, it's life. I rented a small house off a road that barely got plowed. My closest neighbor was far enough that we just waved. I liked it that way. I worked from home, didn't go out much, and honestly liked being snowed in as long as I had power and the internet. That week, the weather reports kept getting worse. First, it was heavy snow, possible, then blizzard coming. By Thursday night, my phone was blowing up with alerts. Whiteout conditions, don't travel, power might be out for days. I stocked up, charged everything, and told myself I'd get through it like always. The snow started Friday afternoon. It came down hard and fast, sideways. By evening, the world outside was just white and dark, shapes where trees used to be. Around 8 p.m., the power flickered, then stayed on. I relaxed a bit, made dinner, poured a drink, and settled in. That's when I noticed the silence. Not the good kind, the bad kind. No wind, no branches hitting the house. It was dead quiet, like someone had covered the house with a blanket. I thought it was weird because blizzards don't just stop. I checked my phone. No new alerts. No service either, which wasn't unusual in storms. The internet was still working, but slow. I didn't worry about it and went back to the couch. About 20 minutes later, the power went out. The house went dark and cold right away. I grabbed a flashlight, lit some candles, and got the generator from the mudroom. I'd used it before, nothing special, but it kept the fridge and a space heater going. I opened the back door, and the cold hit me hard. The snow was deeper than I thought. I sank almost to my shins. The generator was where I left it, under a tarp near the shed. I pulled it closer, fighting the wind that seemed to be back with a vengeance. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. New footprints in the snow, going from the trees to my house. Big boots, deep steps. Whoever it was, they were moving fast. I stood there staring, my brain trying to come up with some explanation. Maybe a utility worker, maybe a neighbor. Nothing made sense. I told myself I was overreacting. I started the generator. The noise was loud and comforting. When I turned back toward the house, I saw something else. The footprints didn't stop at the door. They went around the side of the house, toward the front. I turned off the generator. The silence came back, worse than before. I stood there, listening. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just the storm. I went inside, locked the door, and shut the curtains. I didn't turn the lights on. Something told me not to. I moved through the house, checking the windows. Snow was covering most of them, but I could see enough to know there was no one outside. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. I texted my brother anyway, knowing it wouldn't send, but it made me feel better. That's when I heard the knock. Not loud, just a knock on the front door. I froze. It came again, same rhythm. 3 knocks. I didn't answer. I just stood there in the hallway, shaking the flashlight. After a few seconds, a guy spoke through the door. Calm. He said my name. That freaked me out. I hadn't made a sound. I hadn't told anyone my name. It wasn't on the box. The house number was covered in snow. I stayed quiet. He kept talking, like we were in the middle of a conversation. He said his truck was off the road. He'd been walking. Said he just needed to warm up and use a phone. He sounded annoyed. I went closer to the door, staying out of sight of the window. I asked how he knew my name. He paused. Then he said, "You live here alone. Thought you'd want to help." That was it. Any sympathy I had was gone. I told him I couldn't open the door, but I'd call for help. He didn't like that. His voice changed, just a little. Still calm, but tense. He said phones don't work out here. Help wouldn't come until morning. He said it was getting cold. I told him to leave. Another pause. Then I heard him walk away. I waited, listening for steps in the snow. I didn't hear anything. That was worse. I checked the windows again, still nothing. 5 minutes went by, maybe 10. Then something hit the side of the house. Not a crash, more like a bump. Someone testing the wall. I got a knife from the kitchen. My heart was racing. I thought about how I'd never bothered to get a gun. Another bump, closer to the back. Then I heard him again, talking, like he was standing a few feet away, even though I couldn't see him. He said the storm would get worse. People disappear out here every winter. He said no one would care. I didn't say anything. Then I heard the handle on the back door, like he was seeing if it was locked. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I pushed my dresser in front of it, turned off the flashlight, and stood in the dark, holding the knife. The handle stopped. I thought he'd left. Then I heard someone inside the house. Not running, just walking, like he had all the time in the world. I covered my mouth. How did he get in? The doors were locked. The windows were covered. He walked down the hallway, stopping outside my bedroom door. I could see his shadow under the door. He leaned in. I could hear him breathing. He said he didn't like when people made things hard. He also mentioned the storm hid things. He said I should have opened the door. Then he tried the handle. The door stayed shut. He laughed. Not funny, just sad. Then he walked away. I stayed there for hours. The cold got in. I didn't move until morning. When I opened the bedroom door, the house was empty. The back door was open. Snow was in the kitchen. The generator was gone. Outside, the storm had covered everything. The footprints were gone. The road was gone. It took 6 hours before a plow came and I could get help. The police came, took my story, looked around, didn't find anything. No forced entry, they said. No signs of a fight. Before they left, one of the cops asked how long I'd lived there. I told him a few years. He said, "The last person who lived here disappeared during a storm like this. They never found out what happened to him." I moved out that spring. Sometimes I still think about how calm that man sounded, like the storm was helping him, like he knew something I didn't. If you've never spent a winter way out in the sticks, you probably think freezing to death is the worst part. But for me, it was realizing I wasn't as alone as I thought, or more accurately, as alone as I wanted to be. I'm 31, and for the last 4 years, I've been living in an old farmhouse, maybe 40 miles outside Minot, North Dakota. I do cybersecurity work. I basically get paid to test how secure company networks are, which is a fancy way of saying I sit around in my pajamas trying to hack stuff from my couch. It's a great job if you're okay with being isolated, and honestly, that's why I moved out there in the first place. I grew up in Chicago and I was just done with the city. The noise, the traffic, people always up in your face. Out here, my closest neighbor is Silas. He lives 3 miles down a gravel road, and we only talk when our mail gets mixed up, which is like twice a year. Last winter, we got hit by a storm that the local news was calling one for the ages. They went on about it for a week, and for once, they weren't kidding. This storm was huge. It started on a Tuesday afternoon with this bruised-looking sky, and by 6 p.m. the wind was howling so loud it sounded like a train was parked in my yard. I'm not an idiot, so I prepped. I filled up my propane tank, checked the oil in my generator, and made sure I had enough soup and coffee to last a month. I even hauled a bunch of extra firewood in case the furnace died. I figured I'd just chill out, watch some TV, and wait for the snowplows to dig me out in a few days. By Wednesday morning, the outside world was gone. Just a wall of white. I couldn't even see my barn, which is like 50 feet from the back door. The power went out around 10 a.m., but the generator started right up, so at least I still had lights and a space heater. I spent the day plugging away at some boring data entry, trying not to think about how the house was shaking every time the wind really kicked up. The weird stuff started around 9 p.m. that night. I was in the kitchen, heating up some soup, when I heard a loud thud against the side of the house. It wasn't the wind. It was a solid, rhythmic sound, like someone was hitting the wall with something heavy. I froze, spoon in hand, and waited. It happened again. I thought maybe a piece of siding had come loose, or maybe a branch had fallen off the tree by the porch. I grabbed my jacket and a flashlight, thinking I'd take a quick look and patch something up before it got worse. I barely cracked the back door open before the wind tried to rip it off. It was freezing cold. My teeth hurt instantly. I shined the light along the side of the house, but the snow was so thick, it just reflected the light back at me. I didn't see any loose siding or branches, but I did see something near the foundation, a set of prints in the snow. They were filling in fast, but they looked like boot prints. I won't lie, my heart started racing. There was no reason for anyone to be out there in this storm. I slammed the door, locked it, and did something I hadn't done since I moved in. I checked every window in the house. I tried to think logically. Maybe it was Silas. Maybe his heater broke and he was trying to get to my place for help, got lost. But Silas is 70. He's not going to walk in a storm like that. An hour later, the generator quit. It didn't just run out of gas. It sounded like it broke. Then silence. The only light was the orange glow from the wood stove and my flashlight. I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind, and that fight or flight feeling started kicking in. Then the knocking started, not on the door, on the floor, right under my feet. My house has a crawl space, not a basement. It's a small space filled with dirt and pipes. There's a hatch in the pantry floor, but I'd never opened it. The knocking was slow and steady. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I grabbed my gun. I wouldn't call myself a gun person, but out here, the police are 40 minutes away on a good day. In this storm, they might as well be on another planet. I walked to the pantry, my hand shaking, the flashlight beam all over the place. I stood over the hatch, and the knocking stopped. I yelled, asking who was down there. My voice sounded weak over the wind. No one answered. I waited, then slowly knelt down and pulled on the ring. The smell was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't a people smell. It was like old grease and wet dog. I shined the light down into the dirt, expecting to see a face staring back. There was nothing, just pipes and dirt. Then, in the corner, near the vent, I saw a pile of blankets and a bunch of empty cans of pet food. The cheap stuff I keep in the barn for stray cats. Someone had been living under my house, and they'd been there for weeks. I slammed the hatch shut and dragged the kitchen table over it. My mind was racing. How did I not notice this? I'd been living my life, watching TV, working, sleeping, while someone was right under me, listening to everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the gun, staring at the kitchen table. The storm didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Around 3 a.m., I heard the back door handle jiggling. It's a solid door, but whoever was out there was throwing their weight against it. I walked to the door and yelled that I had a gun, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The rattling stopped. Then, a voice came through the door. It was hard to hear over the wind, but it sounded like a man. He didn't sound mad. He sounded tired. He said he was cold and just wanted to come in. Then he called me by my name. He said, "Come on, Mark, it's freezing out here." I never told anyone my name. I use a P.O. box. I don't have social media. Only the realtor and the utility company know I live there. I didn't open the door. I told him to leave, that I'd called the cops. I was lying. My cell service was dead. Landline was down. He didn't say anything else. I heard him walk off the porch. The rest of the night was caffeine and paranoia. Every creak made me jump. Every time the wind shifted, I thought I heard him whispering. When the sun finally came up, the wind had calmed down and the snow had stopped. I knew I had to get out of there. I didn't care if the roads were clear or not. I had a truck with a plow. I spent 2 hours digging out the back door and the path to the barn. I felt like he was standing right behind me. I got the truck running and plowed my way down the driveway. It took me 3 hours to get to the highway. I drove straight to the sheriff's station. I looked like a mess. I told the deputy everything. The knocking, the hatch, the guy who knew my name. He gave me that look people give city folk who can't handle being in the country. But he sent 2 guys out to check it out. I waited at a diner, drinking coffee that tasted bad. When the deputy came back, he looked different. He wasn't joking around anymore. He sat down and put a plastic bag on the table. Inside was a notebook. He said they found the nest in the crawl space. They also found how the guy was getting in, a loose vent cover. But they didn't find the man. They did find the notebook. I opened it. It was full of writing. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. October 14th, Mark got up at 7:12, made coffee, folded laundry. He likes the blue shirt best. October 18th, Mark talked to his mom on the phone. She sounds nice. He told her he's happy being alone. He's not alone. November 3rd, Mark forgot to lock the barn. I went in and sat in the truck. It smells like him. There were hundreds of entries. Every day for 3 months, this person had been writing about my life. He knew what time I went to bed, what I ate, what websites I visited because he'd been tapping into my Wi-Fi from the crawl space. But here's where it gets really messed up. The deputy told me to go to the last page. The last entry was from Wednesday night, during the storm. The handwriting was shaky. January 12th. The generator is dead. I had to do it. Mark is getting too close. He found the prints. I'm tired of being under the floor. I want to be in the bed. If he won't let me in the door, I'll wait until he leaves, and then I'll be the only Mark left. I felt sick. I asked if they searched the house. He said they looked everywhere. Every room, every closet, the attic. It was empty. I didn't go back to the house. I stayed in a motel and hired movers to get my stuff a week later. I moved back to Chicago. I live in a high-rise now, on the 22nd floor, with a doorman and multiple locks on the door. Some time ago, I was looking at old photos on my laptop, stuff from the farmhouse. I found a video I'd taken of the first snowfall. I was showing off the fireplace. I'd never really looked at the background before. In the reflection of the dark television screen, for a second, you can see pantry door. It's open a bit, and in the darkness, there's a face, a man. But here's what creeps me out the most. I looked at the man in the reflection, and then I looked in a mirror. The man in the pantry didn't just know my name, he looked like me. I've never had a brother. My parents are gone. I don't have any family. I have no idea who that was or why he wanted to be me. I knew something was up the second the trail didn't look right. It wasn't gone or blocked. It just seemed off, like it quit trying to act like it knew where it was going. This happened when I was 30, on a winter camping trip in northern Pennsylvania. Nothing crazy, just a 3-day hike with a couple of buddies I'd known since college. We'd done this before, nothing hardcore. We planned, had the right stuff, checked the weather, all that. The forecast said light snow the first night, clear by morning. Cold, but not too bad. The forecast was wrong. We parked at a trailhead after noon. The woods were silent in that winter kind of way, everything quieted by the snow. No wind, just the sound of our boots and our breath. We were in good spirits, joking around like always. We wanted to hike about 6 miles in, camp near a creek, and go back the next day. About 4 miles in, the snow started coming down harder. Not too bad at first, just steady. We put our hoods up and kept going. One of the guys told us to split up for a bit. He and another wanted to find a campsite they'd seen on a map. I stayed behind to get water from a stream we'd passed. The plan was easy, 15 or 20 minutes, then I'd catch up. I keep thinking about that decision. They kept moving. I went back to the stream, filled my bottles, and didn't hurry. The woods were quiet, but it didn't feel weird yet. Snow was falling heavier, soft, but steady. I remember thinking it was peaceful. When I was done and headed back to the trail, I saw something was wrong. My footprints were disappearing fast. I told myself it was fine. The trail was easy to find. It had been wide enough. But when I stepped back up, I didn't see it right away. Just trees and snow, no path. I walked, expecting to see it soon, but I didn't. I turned around slowly, looking for it. Nothing. No marks, no packed snow, just ground and snow. I kind of started to panic. I wasn't lost yet, but I was alone, and I couldn't see well. I got my phone out, but had no signal. The battery was at 60%. I yelled their names, but the sound didn't go far. Snow makes noise disappear like it's cutting you off. I waited, then yelled again. No one answered. I picked a direction that seemed right and started walking, thinking I'd find the trail again. 5 minutes, then 10. I started breathing harder, not from walking, but because I knew the woods weren't changing. Everything looked the same. Trees spaced apart, snow covering everything, no slope and no sound of the creek. I stopped and told myself to breathe. Panicking would only make it worse. I checked my compass. It worked, but I didn't know where the trail was, so it wasn't very helpful. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail. The snow was coming down harder, and I could only see about 30 feet. I made another mistake then. I didn't stay put like I should have. I kept moving. I told myself I was making progress and that staying still would make me colder. That was true, but I wasn't moving for a reason anymore. I was just wandering. About an hour later, it started getting dark. That's when I really felt the cold, and my fingers were getting stiff, and my jaw was tight. After a while, I saw tracks, but they weren't mine. They were someone's boot prints, partly filled with snow. Not new, but not old, going between the trees in a direction that didn't match any trail. I felt a lot of relief. Someone else was out there, maybe a hunter, another hiker, or even one of my friends coming back. I followed them. They went deeper into the woods, away from where I thought the trail was. I hesitated, then kept going. I didn't want to lose them. The tracks weren't even. Sometimes they were close together, other times far apart. Whoever made them wasn't just walking, they were moving for a reason. I yelled again. My voice sounded weak. No one answered. As it got darker, the woods felt smaller. Branches caught my jacket. Snow went down my neck, and my fingers were numb inside my gloves. Suddenly, the tracks stopped. Just stopped, like the person disappeared. I stood there, looking at the snow, not understanding. No marks, no turn, no nothing. That's when I realized how quiet it was. Not just snow quiet, but everything quiet. No wind, no birds, nothing. I realized how loud I was breathing. Then I heard something else. Footsteps. They were slow, coming from behind me. I turned around fast, my heart racing. Nothing was there, just trees and snow. I told myself it was just my imagination, fear, and adrenaline. I'd read enough about surviving to know your mind plays tricks in the cold. I started walking again, faster, almost running. I didn't want to stay there. Then I saw something that scared me. I passed a tree with a split trunk. I'd already passed it. I stopped, looking at it, the bark, the angle. It was the same tree. I was going in circles. I turned slowly, trying to figure out how I'd done that. Then about 30 feet away, between two trees, there was a man just standing there. Dark jacket, hood up, face hidden. He blended in so well, I almost didn't see him. For a second, I felt relieved. I started to say something. He raised a hand, just a bit, palm toward me. Not a wave, but like he was telling me to stop. I froze. Something about how he stood felt wrong, too relaxed, like he'd been there a while. I waited for him to talk, but he didn't. Snow was piling up on his shoulders and hood, but he didn't brush it off. I asked if he was lost too. No answer. I took a step, but he didn't move. I took another. Then he stepped back, just one step, to keep the same distance between us. Then it made sense. He wasn't lost. I backed away. He didn't follow. He just stood there, watching. The cold hit me hard then. My hands were shaking. I turned and walked away, just needing to get away. I didn't hear footsteps, but I felt like I was being watched. The woods got darker, and my phone battery was dying fast. I stopped checking it. I got so tired I had to stop. My legs felt heavy, and I couldn't think straight. That scared me most of all. I found a tree that had fallen and sat down, pulling my jacket tight, trying to keep the wind out. I tried to stay awake and just breathe. Then I heard the footsteps again. Closer this time. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see him. The steps stopped close by. I waited for a voice, but nothing. Then I felt something weird. Warmth, not from my body, from the air. I could smell smoke. I got up fast, dizzy, and turned around. He wasn't there, but where he'd been, I could see a light through the trees, like someone had lit a fire. I went toward it, almost falling. My legs barely worked. When I got there, I almost fell. It was a small fire pit, carefully made. Someone had been camping there recently. There was a log to sit on and a cup near the fire. No tent, no person. I didn't care. I put more wood on the fire. My hands shook so bad it was hard. I stayed there all night, feeding the fire, dozing off, and waking up when my head fell. In the morning, the storm was gone. I followed the creek and found a road less than a mile away. A ranger picked me up in an hour. My friends were looking for me. They'd called when I didn't show up. I was lucky. That's what everyone said. I never told them about the man. Months later, I looked up missing people in that area. There was one from a few years ago, a winter hiker, same area. Last seen wearing a dark jacket and hoodie, never found. I don't know if the man I saw was the missing person, but whoever was there and lit the fire, I guess he saved my life. I didn't know I was by myself until I turned around and nobody answered. This happened when I was 29, on a winter camping trip in Colorado. We drove out to a national forest area that lets you camp pretty much anywhere. No sign-ups, no bathrooms, just roads through the woods and spots to pull over. It's the kind of place where you better know what you're doing. There were 4 of us. Me, my friend Aaron, his girlfriend, and a guy from work I hardly knew. The plan was easy. Get there before dark, walk about 2 miles to a place we'd camped before, set up and stay the night. No big climbs, no crazy stuff. Just fresh air, a fire, and a break from our phones. It snowed the day before, but that day was clear, cold, but not windy. The kind of winter day that makes you think it's all good. We parked the truck as the sun was going down. The woods were quiet, like they get in winter when sounds don't bounce around. We loaded our packs, locked the truck. The path wasn't really a path, but you could see where people had walked. We joked around, talked, and complained about the cold. You know, normal stuff. After about a mile, it started getting dark fast. Faster than I thought it would. Clouds came in from the west, thick and low. It got cold. You could feel it on your face. Aaron said we should speed up. About a half mile later, the path split. One way went down to a creek. The other stayed higher and went through thicker trees. We'd taken the highway before. It was safer, less icy. I stopped to fix my pack, just a quick thing. I told them to go on, and I'd catch up. They didn't go far. I could still see their lights moving between the trees. I fixed my pack, looked up, and started after them. That's when it started snowing again. Not soft snow, hard, fast flakes that stung your face. The wind picked up, blowing hard through the trees. You couldn't see much. I hurried, yelling that I was right behind them. No one answered. I figured the wind took my voice. I kept going, following what I thought was the path. After a few minutes, I stopped and yelled again, louder this time. Still nothing. I turned on my light and looked around. The snow was already changing everything, softening the edges, filling in the footprints. I told myself they were just ahead, that I'd see them any second, but I didn't. After maybe 10 more minutes, it hit me. The woods didn't look the same. The hill felt wrong. The trees were too close together. I stopped. It was so quiet. It made me notice every breath I took. I checked my phone. No service. The battery was dying fast. I tried calling anyway, and as I expected, nothing. I turned around slowly, looking for lights. No light, no moving, just snow and dark trees. I started walking back. Well, at least I thought I did. But the ground was already covered. My tracks were gone. The path, if there was one, was hard to see. That's when I got really scared. Not panicked. Just a cold feeling, knowing that things could get really bad. I made myself think. I had supplies and extra clothes, a light, a way to start a fire and some food. Not great, but enough to survive. I decided to go downhill. Water leads to people, right? That's what I remembered. As I walked, the woods changed again. The ground got steeper. I slipped a few times, grabbing trees. My gloves got wet. My hands started to hurt. After a while, I saw a fence. It was old. Wood posts, half buried in snow, with rusty wire between them. Not a trail marker. Not new. I didn't know there were any fenced areas out there. I followed it, hoping it would lead somewhere. Maybe into a property. After maybe 100 yards, it just stopped. Broken posts, snapped wire, like someone broke through it a long time ago. Past it, I saw something that made me stop again. There was a building, not a cabin, more like a shack. Low roof, dark wood, no lights. It blended in, with the trees until you were close. I was relieved. Shelter meant warmth. It meant someone else had been there before. I walked up to it slowly. Snow was piled up against one side. The door was shut. I knocked. It sounded too loud. I waited a bit, but no reply. I tried the handle. It was locked. I walked around the building, one small window covered in frost. No footprints around it, and no footprints going away either. The place looked empty. but not that old. The wood wasn't rotten, and it seems the roof was still there. I leaned my pack against the wall and thought about what to do. I didn't want to break in if I didn't have to. Then I heard something. It wasn't coming from inside, but from the woods behind me. Slow and quiet steps. I turned around. Someone was standing near the trees, about 40 feet away. Another hiker, I thought. Dark jacket, hood up, you couldn't see his face. I raised my hand and yelled like a salute gesture. He didn't say anything. I walked closer, feeling better. I told him I'd gotten lost from my group, asked if he knew where we were. He tilted his head a little, like he was listening. Still nothing. I saw then that he didn't have a pack. No gear, no light. That made me nervous. I asked if he was okay. He took a step toward me. Something about how he moved bothered me. Too quiet, too steady. I walked back toward the shack. He stopped moving. We stood there for a few seconds, snow falling between us. Then he pointed past me directly at the shack. I looked back for a second. When I turned around, he was gone. No footprints, no sound of him leaving, just trees. I felt that weird feeling on my back, the one that tells you to get out of there. I grabbed my pack and moved away from the shack, going downhill again. Faster now, not running, but almost. The wind picked up. Snow blew hard. My light shined back in my eyes, and I couldn't see well. I slipped and fell hard on my side. I couldn't breathe for a second. I laid there for a minute, trying to get air. Then I saw a light, a warm light ahead, close to the ground. It was a campfire. I got up and went toward it, every step hard. The fire was in a small spot, blocked by rocks. It wasn't big, but it was still burning. Someone had been there recently. I yelled, my voice shaking. I got no answer. I didn't care. I put more wood on the fire, shaking so bad it was hard to do. I warmed my hands, my face. I stayed there, sitting on a log, listening to the storm. I didn't sleep much. At some point, I woke up to the sound of footsteps walking around the clearing. Slow steps, quiet steps. I stayed still, looked at the fire, acted like I was asleep. The steps stopped behind me. I felt someone there before I saw anything. That same feeling, like someone watching me from close by. I didn't turn around. After a long time, the steps went away. Morning was gray and cold. The storm was gone. The woods looked normal again. I went down a hill and found a forest road. A ranger found me an hour later. My friends were okay. They'd camped further up the trail and realized I didn't show up. They looked for me until the storm made them go back. I asked the ranger about the shack. He said there weren't any buildings out there. I didn't argue. A week later, I looked up old news. Found one about a camp that was taken down in those woods years ago. Someone had been living there illegally, and they left before the cops showed up. No name, no photo. I still wonder if the guy pointed towards the shack was the previous owner. I don't even know if this man was alive.